Over the last few years, I've been on over 50 different flights, been to a ton of countries from around the world, and I've definitely had almost every bad travel scenario you could possibly think of. I've been on flights that have landed due to medical emergencies, flights that have been delayed 12 hours, been to the airport 3 hours early only for the flight to be canceled. I've taken trains, subways, Ubers, and with this much travel, there are a ton of mistakes I've made, and I'm gonna tell you them so you don't have to. So almost everything I'm about to tell you are things that I've learned that can apply to you whether you're a frequent traveler or if you only go once a year. And some of the stuff later in this video are absolute need to knows. Because no matter how much you travel, after I tell you the 10 mistakes that I have made, it's not only gonna save you time, but also hundreds or thousands of dollars. And trust me, I wish someone told me these before I started traveling the world myself. Now we all know that 90% of the time when you're traveling, you're gonna be flying somewhere, but you have to be very careful what airline you pick. Almost all of the time on Google Flights or any travel company, they will only show you the major airlines, but you don't need to fly them. A lot of people don't actually know this, but there's something called budget airlines, which will save you a ton of money if you are flying them for the right reasons. Pretty much the way these airlines work is if you are traveling light, the ticket itself is extremely cheap, but all the costs come if you want check bags or anything like that. And this is where I made my first mistake. Almost all the time, if you are going from one major city to another, there will always be the main airlines and a budget airline going there. Let's just say you're only traveling with a backpack and a carry-on for a few days, it will always make more sense to travel on the budget airline. This is because the base fare is way cheaper, and after you pay for your carry-on, it's likely to come out to be about $100 less than a major airline. Pretty much the only benefits to a major airline is if you are traveling with a lot of luggage or you fly a lot and you want to build up loyalty. But if you're only traveling ever so often, it actually doesn't make sense to book with a major airline because you're not going to get the loyalty rewards anyways. And if you're packing light, it just makes way more sense to go with the cheaper option. But speaking of flights, this brings me to my second mistake I've made, and that is to never pick your seat beforehand. Unless you're traveling with a group, it makes absolutely no sense because almost every single airline now will charge you extra just to pick your seat. Personally, every single time I've traveled, whether it be a budget airline or a major airline, I have never booked a seat, and I'll just go to the front desk when I check in, and every single time I end up getting a good one. Also, pro tip, if you want better service, you could actually just pretend you're some sort of social media person with your phone or camera, and almost all of the time they will treat you way better. For example, just a few weeks ago, I was traveling with an airline and they wanted to charge me about $30 to pick my seat, and I decided not to do that, and when I got to the airport, I was given a window for free. And even if you get the free seat at the airport and you don't like it, you could literally go to the gate right before the plane boards, and they will almost always switch it if they have availability. Now, I'm gonna tell you a secret that you may have never even thought of before or heard of. When you are booking a flight, always book on a credit card. You should never book through debit or any other form of payment because when you have a credit card and you pay through that, you actually get insurance and other benefits. For example, almost every credit card comes with travel insurance or something to that extent, which is super helpful. But if you want to take it a step further, you could actually get travel credit cards. Most of the time, these come with an annual fee, but it is actually quite deceptive. For example, the longest time I was personally traveling with an Airline credit card, which costs about $120 a year. But when I signed up, there was a huge bonus which pretty much paid for the card itself, and on top of that, I got the first year free. And with those points, I was able to buy a free flight, which again covered the entire thing. But it doesn't just end here because you could actually take it one step further. For example, there is something called the American Express Platinum card. On the surface, when you look at it, it has an annual fee of $699, which is a lot. But what if I told you that was kind of a lie? For example, once I got the card, I automatically got a $200 travel credit, and on top of that, I also got a $240 credit for digital entertainment. That means I could put that money towards Disney Plus or other streaming services for absolutely free, which I would likely be paying for anyways. So just from that alone, your $700 card now comes down to about $260 a year. On top of that, through this Platinum card, I get unlimited lounge access anywhere in the world. That means whenever I travel, I could get free food, free snacks, and free drinks before the flight, which almost everybody would be paying for anyways, so it just saves you a ton of money. But there are so many more perks, benefits, and rewards that you could get with this card, so I put a link down in the description if you guys are interested. And in the future, I'll be making an entire video covering everything about it. But speaking of food, snacks, drinks, and all that stuff, this is something I learned the hard way. Last year when I was coming back from Italy, my flight was canceled, so they handed out food vouchers. These are the most deceptive things out there. The food voucher that I got was $10, and I took it thinking that was all I was entitled to. But it turned out the guy right beside me had this happen to him before, and he actually debated with them and managed to get a $50 food voucher instead. So obviously I saw this and I got upset, so I went back to them saying, hey, can I get a $50 food voucher too? But because I took the initial $10 voucher, that means legally I claimed what the airline gave me, so I was no longer able to get that $50 voucher. And this actually happened to me another time when I had a 12-hour layover. That time they only gave me a $20 food voucher for 12 hours, which is absurd. Because the way it works is the airline is supposed to give you compensation based on your circumstances. For example, if you are traveling with 4 people, you should get enough money for all 4 of you people to eat. On top of that, if your flight was delayed 12 hours like mine was, I was supposed to be getting lunch, dinner, and snack compensation. But because I took that voucher, I was no longer entitled to anything more. So if this ever happens to you, make sure you argue with them and try and get the most money possible. But now I'm gonna tell you guys something that you have probably never heard of before. Because I didn't, and I almost missed my flight because of it. So a little over a year ago, I was flying from Toronto to LA. To give a little bit of backstory, it was about 8 a.m. in the morning, and at 10 a.m. that day, there was supposed to be a major snowstorm. So I got to the airport at the normal time. Security was a little bit busy, so by the time I got to my gate, it was right when boarding was supposed to be. So I am walking towards my gate, and there is someone at the end yelling towards me. I'm like, okay, it's not me. There's probably someone behind me. It's not my gate, like whatever. But as I got closer, it turns out they were yelling at me asking if I was Eric Struk. So obviously I was extremely confused, and then they told me the flight was almost fully boarded already. So obviously I was extremely confused by this, and then they told me that airlines could actually board early and leave early if everyone is checked in. I know, it's crazy. The gate agent later explained to me that the reason why they were in such a rush and they wanted to board early is because they wanted to get out of the airport before the storm, which fully makes sense. But for someone who had no idea that was a thing, I almost missed my flight. So maybe every time my parents tell me to be 3 hours early for my flight, I should start listening. But now while we're on the topic of boarding planes and gates, there is another big mistake I am guilty of multiple times. Again, last year on my Italy trip, I was flying from Rome to Palermo, and I thought I was at the right gate. Pretty much once I got my boarding pass, I saw the gate, I went there, and I was just waiting around. And then when it was time for boarding, I went up to my gate only to realize it was a different airline. Pretty much what ended up happening was the airline switched the original gate to another one, and I never got a text or an email about it. So as soon as I realized this, I sprinted through the airport as fast as I possibly could and made it to my gate just in time. And from that day on, I learned the valuable lesson to always check the airport boards to make sure your gate is the right one that it says. Because if you have a physical boarding pass, they can change it and you will never know. And the airline does not care. They will leave you at the airport and blame you because technically it's your fault for not realizing, which is ridiculous and frustrating, but that's just how the travel world is. Now, while we're on the topic of flights being insanely expensive, there have been times I could have saved hundreds of dollars if I knew these few things. Number one, if you are booking a flight, make sure your browser is on incognito mode. Because by doing this, the website can no longer track your existing data, which makes you a generalized user. Because sometimes if they know you travel a lot, they will actually raise the prices ever so slightly compared to general people. But then there's actually another thing you can do to save even more money, but it is kind of unethical and a little bit messed up. Pretty much all you have to do is set up a VPN and put your location to a poorer country, and sometimes the fares will actually be lower. The reason for this is because airlines want people to travel no matter where you are in the world. But they also understand that the economical situation of some places are a lot worse than others, which means they will often offer the same flight for way cheaper so people from that country can afford it. And by using a VPN, you can pretend you are in that country to save money. Again, is this messed up? kinda. But if you really want to save money, it is an option. And another mistake that I have personally made that I have seen so many people make is not waiting for a holiday sale from airlines. Pretty much every airline will offer sales on Valentine's Day, Christmas, Easter, and any major holiday. And there have been times that I have personally booked a flight and 2 days later a 30% sale started, which means I could have had the exact same flight for 30% cheaper. And with summer coming up, I guarantee there are going to be a lot of you guys flying, especially towards Europe. And I'm sure we can all relate that the prices right now are absurd. And last year I flew to Italy direct, and if I chose to have a layover, I would have saved up to $200. For example, if you are planning to fly to Europe, the 3 cheapest places to fly into are Lisbon, Dublin, and Porto. Not only are these beautiful destinations on their own, but you could spend a day here and then transfer to a European airline. For example, there is Ryanair, which pretty much flies to anywhere in Europe for just $50. And sometimes it is actually even cheaper. So instead of spending over $1,000 from North America to Europe, you should actually spend only $600 to one of the cheaper locations and then transfer to a European airline. And going back to earlier in this video, there are actually budget options to get to Europe, which are way cheaper than the flights you will see on Google Flights and any travel website. But now, one of the biggest mistakes that I've made, and I have seen so many other people make when booking a trip, is overpacking. I used to travel with a fully checked bag, but then I realized every single time I got there, I wouldn't use half the stuff I brought, and on top of that, I would have no room for buying things once I got to my destination. So last year, when I traveled to Italy, I only went with a backpack and a duffel bag, and it lasted me the entire week and a half. I can promise you, you do not need that 3rd or 4th outfit you wanted to bring. If you really want more clothes, you could just buy them at the place you're going to, and most of the time, it's gonna be cheaper than at home. And especially if you are planning to buy things when you are there, you need to be careful about the weight. My parents are so guilty of this because they will pack a bag pretty much up to the limit, and then once they get to the destination and they want to buy something, their bag is then over the limit coming home, which means fees and charges and just a giant headache that you don't want to deal with. Trust me when I say this, if you pack less, you will make it work. It will be absolutely fine. But now this next mistake is something I am so guilty of because I am usually just too lazy to look into it, and I see so many other people falling into the exact same trap. When you travel somewhere, you should avoid shuttles and Ubers at all costs. The reason why I say this is because most of the time they are way overpriced, and almost every single major airport now has some sort of public transit that connects to the downtown. For example, last year when me and my best friend traveled to Europe, we ended up booking a $75 shuttle from the airport to downtown. But as soon as we landed, we realized there was a train that took you from the airport to downtown for about 12 bucks. Literally, if we had just done a little bit more research, we could have saved that money, spent it on food or other things that we were doing. And I guarantee that most of you have run into this issue as well. But now, obviously, when you travel, you need somewhere to stay. And pretty much everyone now will default to Airbnbs or pay full price for hotels. Obviously, I used to do that until I realized there was a better option. There are actually websites that offer you mystery hotels at an extremely discounted rate. Pretty much the way these websites work is they will get extra inventory from the hotel and they will be tasked to sell it off. Once you get onto these websites, you'll be able to see a general overview of what it is, and most of the time it will provide you with one picture, but they will not tell you what the hotel is. But the way around this is simply by saving the image, opening up Google, and importing the image into Google. Then you can see exactly which hotel you would be booking. That way you could actually look into the hotel to see if you would want to stay there, then go back to the mystery website to go and book it. Because personally, I have done this and saved up to 30% on a hotel I would normally be staying at anyways. And going back to Airbnbs, they're not the worst thing in the world. I actually really like them, but sometimes they can be extremely pricey and hide hidden fees under cleaning and other stuff, which are just extra things that you don't want to be paying for. But anyways, I hope you guys have been able to learn something from the mistakes I've made, because I can guarantee they will save you time and money. But if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys subscribe and check out this video next, because it is one of my personal favorites that I have made.